The black SUV pulled up to the old community center on the east side of Manhattan. Vin Diesel sat in the back seat, looking out at the building he had driven past so many times before. The brick walls were weathered and covered with faded murals. The windows had metal bars on them. It reminded him of places from his childhood, places where he used to spend time when he had nowhere else to go. His assistant opened the door and he stepped out onto the sidewalk. A small crowd had already gathered outside, people waiting to see him. He smiled and waved, but his mind was somewhere else. Today was supposed to be simple. Show up, take some photos, give a short speech about the importance of supporting youth programs, and leave. He had done events like this dozens of times before. The director of the center, a woman named Patricia, greeted him at the entrance. She was in her 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. She thanked him repeatedly for coming, explaining how much it meant to the kids and the community. Vin listened politely as she walked him through the building, showing him the different rooms where children came after school for tutoring, art classes, and sports activities. The walls were covered with drawings and paintings made by the kids. Some showed families holding hands, others showed superheroes flying through the sky. Vin paused at one drawing of a man lifting weights with the words, "Be strong," written in crayon above it. Patricia noticed him looking and smiled. She said the kids loved action movies and many of them dreamed of being actors or stuntmen one day. As they walked down a narrow hallway, Vin heard the sound of basketballs bouncing in the gym and kids laughing in another room. The building was alive with energy. Patricia led him to a large common area where the main event would take place. Volunteers were setting up chairs and a small stage with a microphone. She explained that about 60 kids would be attending, ranging from ages 10 to 17. But before the event started, Patricia said she wanted to show him something special. She led him to a quieter part of the building, down another hallway to a small room with old couches and tables. She called it the reflection room, a place where kids could go when they needed time alone or wanted to work on personal projects. That was when Vin saw him. A teenage boy sat in the corner of the room, hunched over a notebook. He was drawing something, his hand moving quickly across the page. He wore a gray hoodie and baggy jeans. His dark hair fell over his forehead, and he did not look up when they entered the room. Patricia called out to him gently, saying his name was Marcus and that he was one of their regular visitors. Marcus barely acknowledged them. He glanced up for just a second, his eyes meeting Vin's, then returned to his drawing. There was no excitement, no recognition, nothing. Most kids would have jumped up or asked for an autograph, but Marcus acted like Vin was just another person walking through the building. Patricia seemed embarrassed. She apologized, saying Marcus was going through a difficult time and was not very social these days. Vin raised his hand and told her it was fine. Something about the boy caught his attention. It was not just the indifference, but the way he held himself. The tension in his shoulders. The way he kept his head down. The invisible wall he had built around himself. Vin told Patricia he would catch up with her in a few minutes. She hesitated but then nodded and left the room, closing the door softly behind her. Vin walked slowly toward the corner where Marcus sat. He did not rush or make a big entrance. He simply pulled up a chair and sat down a few feet away, not too close but close enough to see what Marcus was drawing. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Marcus continued sketching, pretending Vin was not there. Vin could see the drawing taking shape on the page. It was an action scene, a figure jumping from a building with an explosion in the background. The details were impressive. Marcus had talent. Finally, Vin broke the silence. He asked Marcus what he was working on. Marcus did not answer at first. He kept drawing, adding shadows to the figure in midair. Then, without looking up, he said it was just something he liked to do. Nothing special. Just sketches. Vin leaned forward slightly, studying the drawing more closely. He told Marcus it looked pretty special to him. The composition was strong. The movement was clear. Marcus paused for a moment, his pencil hovering over the paper. He glanced at Vin with a guarded expression, as if trying to figure out if he was being mocked or if the compliment was real. Vin asked if Marcus liked action movies. The boy shrugged and said he watched them sometimes. Vin smiled and said he figured as much from the drawing. He asked if Marcus had a favorite. Another shrug. Marcus said he liked a lot of them but did not have one favorite. He added that movies were just a way to pass time, nothing more. Vin recognized that tone. The deliberate downplaying of something that clearly mattered. He had used the same strategy when he was younger, pretending not to care about things, so it would hurt less if they were taken away. It was a defense mechanism, a way to protect yourself from disappointment. Vin decided to take a different approach. He asked Marcus how long he had been coming to the center. Marcus said about a year, maybe a little more. He came after school, most days because it was better than going back to his foster home right away. The words came out flat, matter of fact, like he was talking about the weather. Foster home. That explained some of the walls. Vin asked if Marcus liked drawing other things besides action scenes. Marcus finally set down his pencil and looked at Vin directly. He said he drew whatever came to mind. Sometimes superheroes, sometimes regular people, sometimes just random stuff. It helped him think. Vin nodded slowly. He understood that too. He told Marcus that when he was younger, acting had been the same for him. It was a way to escape, to become someone else for a while, to forget about the things that hurt. Marcus studied him for a moment, and something shifted in his expression. A small crack in the wall. Marcus asked if Vin really meant that or if he was just saying it because that was what famous people did at charity events. Vin laughed, a genuine laugh that filled the small room. He told Marcus he appreciated the honesty. He said he really meant it. Growing up had not been easy for him either. He did not know his biological father. He grew up in tough neighborhoods. He felt angry a lot of the time. Marcus seemed surprised by this confession. He asked how Vin went from that to being in movies. Vin explained it was a long road. His stepfather introduced him to theater when he was young. At first, he thought it was stupid, but then he realized he was good at it. It gave him something to focus on, something that was his. But it took years of work, years of rejection, years of doubt before anything happened. Marcus listened carefully. He asked how old Vin was when he figured out what he wanted to do. Vin thought about it and said he was probably around Marcus's age, maybe 15 or 16. He did not have it all figured out, but he knew he wanted to do something creative, something that mattered to him. Before Marcus could respond, Patricia knocked on the door and poked her head in. She reminded Vin that they needed to start the main event soon. Vin stood up and told Marcus he would like to talk more later if Marcus was interested. Marcus shrugged again, but this time there was less edge to it. He said maybe. As Vin walked toward the door, Marcus called out to him. Vin turned back. Marcus asked why he had bothered to sit down and talk instead of just taking pictures and leaving like most celebrities did. Vin smiled and said because Marcus reminded him of someone. Marcus asked who. Vin paused in the doorway and said himself. Then he left the room, leaving Marcus alone with his drawings and his thoughts. The main event went smoothly. Vin gave his speech, took photos with dozens of excited kids, and answered questions about his movies. But throughout the entire event, his mind kept returning to the boy in the reflection room, Marcus. There was something about him that Vin could not shake. After the official program ended, Vin found Patricia and asked about Marcus's situation. She led him to her office, a small cluttered space filled with filing cabinets and stacks of paperwork. She closed the door and sat down with a heavy sigh. She explained that Marcus had been in the foster care system since he was 7 years old. His mother had lost custody due to drug addiction, and his father had never been in the picture. Marcus had been moved between different foster homes over the years. Some were better than others, but none of them became permanent. He had behavioral issues when he was younger, mostly anger problems and difficulty trusting adults. Now at 15 he had calmed down on the outside, but Patricia worried he had just learned to hide his feelings better. He came to the center almost every day, usually keeping to himself, drawing in his notebook. Vin asked if Marcus had any family members who stayed in contact. Patricia shook her head. His mother was still dealing with her addiction and had no stable housing. There were no other relatives who had stepped forward to take him in. Marcus was essentially alone in the world, being raised by a system that was overwhelmed and underfunded. Something about this story hit Vin hard. He thought about his own childhood, growing up in the projects of New York City. His biological father had left before he was born. He never knew the man. For years, that absence created a hole inside him, a constant question of why he was not wanted. But then his mother married Irving Vincent, a man who chose to be his father, who gave him his last name, who showed him what it meant to be loved and supported. Irving had been the one to introduce Vin to theater. He was a theater manager and acting instructor, and he brought young Vin into that world. At first, Vin resisted. He was angry and confused about his identity. He was mixed race in a time and place where that made things complicated. He felt like he did not fit anywhere. But theater became his refuge. It gave him a place to belong. Vin asked Patricia if he could speak with Marcus again before leaving. She seemed surprised but pleased. She said Marcus was probably still in the reflection room if he had not left already. Vin thanked her and made his way back through the building. The hallways were quieter now. Most of the kids had gone home. Vin found Marcus exactly where he had left him, still drawing in his notebook. This time Marcus looked up when Vin entered. He did not smile, but there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Vin asked if he could sit down again. Marcus gestured to the chair with his pencil. Vin settled in and asked what Marcus was working on now. Marcus turned the notebook so Vin could see. It was a different scene this time. A lone figure standing on a rooftop looking out over a city skyline. The detail was remarkable. The perspective was perfect. Vin told Marcus he had real talent. Marcus closed the notebook abruptly and said, "Talent did not matter if you had nowhere to go with it." Vin recognized the bitterness in those words. He had felt the same way once. He asked Marcus what he meant by that. Marcus hesitated, then the words came pouring out. He said people like him did not get to have dreams. Foster kids, kids with no family, kids with no money, they were just supposed to survive, get through school if they were lucky, maybe find some basic job and try not to mess up too badly. Nobody expected anything more from them. Nobody believed they could do anything special. Vin let Marcus finish before responding. He told Marcus he understood feeling that way. He shared more about his own background, about growing up without his biological father, about the struggle of figuring out who he was supposed to be. He talked about the anger he carried as a teenager, the feeling that the world had dealt him a bad hand before he even had a chance to play. Marcus listened intently now, his defensive posture softening slightly. He asked how Vin got past all that. Vin said it was not something that happened overnight. It took time, and it took people who believed in him when he did not believe in himself. His stepfather Irving was the biggest part of that. Irving showed him that family was not just about blood. It was about choice. Irving chose to be his father. That choice meant everything. Vin explained that Irving introduced him to acting not because he thought Vin would become famous, but because he saw that Vin needed an outlet for all the emotions he carried. Theater became that outlet. It let him explore different parts of himself. It taught him discipline and confidence. It showed him he was capable of more than he thought. Marcus asked if it was hard to make it as an actor. Vin laughed and said it was one of the hardest things he ever did. He faced rejection constantly. He went to auditions where casting directors took one look at him and said he did not fit what they were looking for. He was too muscular, too ethnic, too different. He could not find work because he did not fit into the narrow boxes that Hollywood had created. But Vin refused to give up. He and his friends started making their own films. They scraped together money, borrowed equipment, and shot movies on the streets of New York. Those early projects were rough and low budget, but they were his. He was telling his own stories, creating his own opportunities. Eventually, one of those short films caught the attention of Steven Spielberg, and that changed everything. Marcus seemed genuinely interested now. He asked what the film was about. Vin explained it was called Multifacial, and it was about his struggles as a multiracial actor trying to find work in an industry that did not know what to do with him. It was personal and raw and honest, and it showed people who he really was. The conversation continued for another hour. Vin talked about his early roles, the breakthrough with Saving Private Ryan, and building the Fast and Furious franchise. But he also talked about the failures, the projects that did not work out, the times he doubted himself. He wanted Marcus to understand that success was not a straight line. It was messy and difficult, and required constantly pushing forward even when things looked hopeless. Marcus opened up more as well. He talked about his love for movies and how he used to imagine stories in his head all the time. He said drawing was his way of getting those stories out. Sometimes he drew comic book-style panels, creating entire narratives in his notebook. He had filled dozens of notebooks over the years with his drawings. Vin asked if anyone else had seen his work. Marcus said not really. His social worker had looked at some of his drawings once and said they were nice, but that was about it. He did not show them to people at his foster home. He did not want to hear them say it was a waste of time, or that he should focus on something more practical. Vin understood that fear. He told Marcus that protecting your dreams was important, but hiding them away completely could be just as dangerous. Dreams needed air to breathe. They needed to be shared and developed and challenged. He asked Marcus if he would be willing to show his work to more people, maybe even consider pursuing art or film more seriously. Marcus looked skeptical. He said he was just a kid in foster care. Nobody was going to take him seriously. Vin leaned forward and spoke firmly but kindly. He said that was exactly the kind of thinking that would keep Marcus stuck. He told Marcus that his circumstances right now did not define his future, unless he let them. Vin made a decision in that moment. He asked Marcus if he would be interested in staying in touch, maybe meeting up again sometime. Marcus looked surprised and suspicious at the same time. He asked why someone like Vin would want to stay in touch with someone like him. Vin smiled and said because he saw potential in Marcus, and because he remembered what it felt like to be 15 years old and angry at the world with no clear path forward. Marcus did not respond immediately. He seemed to be weighing whether this was real or just another empty promise from an adult who would forget about him as soon as they left the building. Finally, he said okay, but only if Vin was serious about it. He did not want charity or pity. If Vin was just doing this to feel good about himself, Marcus would rather he just leave now. Vin respected the honesty. He pulled out his phone and asked Patricia to come to the room. When she arrived, Vin asked if it would be possible to arrange future meetings with Marcus, maybe bring him to visit a film set or connect him with some people in the creative industry. Patricia was thrilled and said she would work with Marcus's social worker to make it happen. Marcus watched this exchange with guarded hope in his eyes. As Vin prepared to leave, he told Marcus to keep drawing and to keep that notebook close. Those stories in his head deserved to be told. Marcus nodded slowly, still not quite believing this was happening. As Vin walked out of the community center that evening, he felt something he had not expected to feel when he arrived. Purpose. Meeting Marcus reminded him of why success mattered beyond the fame and money. It gave him the power to open doors for others, the way doors had been opened for him. He was determined not to let this be just another celebrity photo opportunity. This was the beginning of something real. 3 weeks passed before Vin was able to follow through on his promise. His filming schedule had been packed with back-to-back scenes for his latest action movie. But he had not forgotten about Marcus. He had his assistant coordinate with Patricia and Marcus's social worker to arrange a visit to the film set. When the day finally arrived, Vin found himself more excited than he expected to be. Marcus arrived at the studio lot early in the morning. Vin had sent a car to pick him up from the community center. When Marcus stepped out of the vehicle, his eyes went wide. The studio was massive, with enormous sound stages and people rushing in every direction carrying equipment, costumes, and props. It was organized chaos, and Marcus looked completely overwhelmed. Vin met him at the entrance and saw the mixture of excitement and fear on the boy's face. He put a hand on Marcus's shoulder and told him to relax. He explained that film sets could be intimidating at first, but once you understood how everything worked together, it was like watching a giant puzzle come together piece by piece. They started with a tour of the lot. Vin showed Marcus the different sound stages, explaining what was being filmed in each one. They passed by the costume department where dozens of outfits hung on racks, each tagged and organized for specific scenes. They walked through the props warehouse where everything from fake weapons to antique furniture was stored. Marcus could not stop staring at everything around him. The first real stop was the makeup and effects trailer. Vin introduced Marcus to the special effects team who were working on prosthetics and fake injuries for the day's scenes. They showed Marcus how they created realistic-looking cuts and bruises using makeup and latex. One of the artists even demonstrated on Marcus's arm creating a fake wound that looked shockingly real. Marcus kept examining it from different angles, fascinated by how something so simple could look so convincing on camera. Next, they visited the stunt coordination area. This was where the real magic happened for action films. Vin introduced Marcus to the stunt coordinator, a veteran named Jake who had worked on dozens of major films. Jake was in the middle of planning a fight sequence, using a storyboard to map out each move. He explained to Marcus how stunts were carefully choreographed and practiced repeatedly before they were ever filmed. Jake asked if Marcus wanted to see a demonstration. Marcus nodded eagerly. Two stunt performers went through a fight scene in slow motion, breaking down each punch, kick, and fall. They explained how they made contact look real while keeping everyone safe. They showed Marcus the pads and protective gear they wore under their costumes. Marcus asked questions about everything, his earlier shyness completely gone now. Jake noticed Marcus's enthusiasm and asked if he wanted to try something simple. Marcus hesitated, looking at Vin for approval. Vin encouraged him to go for it. Under Jake's careful instruction, Marcus learned how to throw a stage punch and how to react to getting hit without actually making contact. It took several tries, but Marcus eventually got the timing right. The stunt team applauded, and Marcus broke into a genuine smile. It was the first time Vin had seen him truly happy. After the stunt demonstration, they headed to the main soundstage where Vin would be filming scenes that afternoon. The massive space was filled with elaborate sets, lighting rigs, cameras, and at least 50 crew members, all focused on their specific tasks. Marcus watched as grips adjusted lights, camera operators checked angles, and the director consulted with the cinematographer about the next shot. Vin explained each role to Marcus. He pointed out the director of photography, the gaffer who controlled the lighting, the script supervisor who made sure everything stayed consistent between takes, and the production assistants who kept everything running smoothly. Marcus seemed amazed by how many people it took to make a single scene. The director called for places, and Vin had to step away to prepare for his scene. He made sure Marcus had a good spot to watch from, right next to the video monitors where he could see exactly what the cameras were capturing. Marcus sat down, his eyes glued to the screens. The scene they were filming was an intense confrontation between Vin's character and another actor. Vin had to deliver his lines with anger and barely controlled violence. Marcus watched as they filmed the same scene over and over from different angles. Sometimes the director asked for more intensity. Sometimes he wanted a different delivery of a specific line. Sometimes technical issues required them to start over. What struck Marcus most was how professional and patient everyone was. Nobody got angry when mistakes happened. They just reset and tried again. Between takes, the serious atmosphere would break and people would laugh and joke around. Then, as soon as the director called action, everyone snapped back into focus. During a longer break, Vin brought Marcus over to meet the director. The director was friendly and asked Marcus what he thought of filmmaking so far. Marcus admitted it was way more complicated than he expected. He had always thought actors just showed up, said their lines, and went home. He did not realize how much planning and repetition went into every single shot. The director laughed and said that was exactly what most people thought. He explained that filmmaking was all about problem solving. Every day brought new challenges, whether it was technical issues, creative disagreements, or simple logistics. The key was having a team of skilled people who could work together to find solutions. He asked Marcus what interested him most about the process so far. Marcus said he loved the stunt work and the special effects, but he was also fascinated by the production design. He had noticed all the details in the sets, how everything was placed deliberately to create a specific look and feel. The director seemed impressed by Marcus's observation and introduced him to the production designer. The production designer was a woman named Sarah, who had been working in films for 20 years. She showed Marcus sketches and concept art for the sets they were using. She explained how she worked with the director to create the visual style of the film. Every color choice, every piece of furniture, every texture was intentional. It all served the story and the characters. Sarah asked Marcus if he had any artistic background. Marcus hesitated, then mentioned his drawing. Sarah asked if she could see some of his work. Marcus pulled out his ever-present notebook from his backpack and handed it to her nervously. Sarah flipped through the pages slowly, studying each drawing carefully. Her expression grew more interested with each page. She told Marcus his sense of composition was excellent. His action scenes had clear flow and movement. His attention to detail was impressive. She asked if he had ever considered pursuing art or design professionally. Marcus admitted he had thought about it, but did not think it was realistic for someone in his situation. Sarah asked what he meant by that. Marcus explained briefly about being in foster care, about not having resources or connections, about feeling like he was just trying to survive day by day, rather than plan for some distant future. Sarah listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, she told him something that stuck with him. She said she had grown up poor in a small town with parents who did not understand her love for art. She had no connections to the film industry and no money for fancy art schools, but she was determined. She worked regular jobs while taking community college art classes. She built a portfolio. She volunteered on small independent films just to learn. She knocked on doors and sent out her work to anyone who would look at it. It took years of struggle and rejection, but eventually, her talent and persistence paid off. Sarah told Marcus that his circumstances were difficult, but they did not have to be permanent. If he was serious about pursuing creative work, there were paths forward. It would require dedication and hard work, but it was possible. She gave Marcus her card and told him to stay in touch. She said if he kept developing his skills and building his portfolio, she would be happy to give him advice and maybe even connect him with opportunities down the line. Marcus looked down at the business card in his hand like it was made of gold. Vin watched this exchange and felt a deep satisfaction. This was what he had hoped would happen, not just showing Marcus the glamorous side of filmmaking, but connecting him with real professionals who could guide him. The rest of the day flew by. Marcus watched more filming, asked countless questions, and absorbed everything like a sponge. During lunch, he sat with various crew members who shared their own stories of how they got into the industry. Each person had taken a different path, but they all emphasized the same things: persistence, continuous learning, and building relationships. As the sun began to set and filming wrapped for the day, Vin walked Marcus back to the car. Marcus was quiet during the walk, processing everything he had experienced. Finally, he spoke. He thanked Vin for the opportunity. He said it was the best day he had experienced in years, maybe ever. Vin told Marcus this did not have to be a one-time thing. If Marcus was interested, they could arrange more visits. Vin could also help Marcus explore educational programs related to art and film. But it was up to Marcus. Vin could open doors, but Marcus would have to be the one to walk through them. Marcus asked why Vin was doing all this. What did he get out of it? Vin stopped walking and turned to face Marcus. He told him the truth. The visits to the film set became more regular over the following months. Vin made sure to include Marcus whenever his schedule allowed. But it was during one particular evening, about 4 months after their first meeting, that the real breakthrough happened. Vin had invited Marcus to dinner at a quiet restaurant, just the two of them. No cameras, no film sets, just a conversation. They sat in a corner booth away from the main crowd. Marcus seemed more comfortable around Vin now, but there was still a guardedness about him, a wall that had not completely come down. They talked about Marcus's latest drawings and about a production design class he had started attending through a program at the community center. Marcus was doing well in the class, surprising even himself with how much he enjoyed it. But Vin noticed something was off. Marcus was distracted, his responses shorter than usual. Finally, Vin asked directly what was bothering him. Marcus stared at his plate for a long moment before speaking. He said his social worker had told him they might be moving him to a different foster home. The current family was having problems and might not be able to keep him much longer. Vin could hear the resignation in Marcus's voice. This was not the first time he had been moved. Marcus said it did not really matter anyway. Foster homes were all basically the same. You tried not to get too comfortable because you knew it would not last. You kept your stuff packed and ready. You did not make plans too far into the future. Vin asked how Marcus felt about being moved again. Marcus shrugged, that familiar defense mechanism kicking in. He said he was used to it, but his hands were clenched into fists on the table, betraying the emotion he was trying to hide. Vin recognized that gesture. He had done the same thing countless times as a teenager. Vin set down his fork and spoke carefully. He told Marcus it was okay to be angry about the situation. It was okay to admit that it hurt to never have a stable home. Marcus looked up sharply. and for a moment, Vin thought he might shut down completely. But instead, something broke. Marcus's voice cracked as he started talking. He said he was tired of pretending everything was fine. He was tired of being moved around like a piece of furniture that nobody really wanted. He was tired of social workers who meant well, but had too many cases to really care. He was tired of foster parents who took kids in for the money, or because they thought it would make them feel good, but never really treated them like family. The words poured out faster now. Marcus talked about his mother, about the few memories he had of her before the drugs took over completely. He talked about wondering where his father was, why he had never tried to find him, why he was not worth sticking around for. He talked about feeling invisible, like he could disappear tomorrow and nobody would truly miss him. Vin listened without interrupting, letting Marcus release years of bottled-up pain. When Marcus finally stopped, his eyes were red, but he had not cried. He apologized for unloading all of that. Vin told him there was nothing to apologize for. What Marcus was feeling was real and valid, and he had every right to be angry about the hand he had been dealt. Then Vin began to share his own story in more depth than he had before. He talked about his biological father, a man whose name he knew but whose face he had never seen. He talked about the confusion of growing up mixed race, about being called names and feeling like he did not fit in anywhere. He talked about the anger that burned inside him as a teenager, anger at his absent father, anger at a world that seemed to judge him before he even had a chance. Marcus listened intently as Vin described his relationship with Irving Vincent, his stepfather. Vin explained that Irving had no obligation to him. Irving could have just dated his mother and kept distance from her kids. But instead, Irving chose to be a father. He chose to give Vin his last name. He chose to introduce him to theater and support his dreams even when they seemed impossible. Vin said that relationship taught him something crucial about family. Blood did not make someone a parent. Choice did. Commitment did. Showing up every day and actually caring about another person's well-being, that was what made someone family. Irving had not erased the pain of his biological father's absence, but he had shown Vin what real fatherhood looked like. Marcus asked if Vin ever stopped being angry about his biological father leaving. Vin was quiet for a moment, considering the question carefully. He said the anger had changed over time. It became less sharp, less consuming. He eventually realized that holding on to that anger was only hurting himself. His biological father had made his choice years ago, and Vin could not change that. But he could choose how to move forward. Vin explained that he had to grieve the father he never had, mourn that loss, before he could fully appreciate the father who had chosen him. It was not about forgetting or pretending the pain did not exist. It was about acknowledging it and then deciding not to let it define his entire life. Marcus was silent for a long time after that. The restaurant continued its quiet hum around them, but their booth felt like its own separate world. Finally, Marcus spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. He said he was scared that the anger inside him was too big, too permanent. He was scared he would never be able to move past it. Vin reached across the table, and for the first time, Marcus did not pull away. Vin told him the anger was not the enemy. The anger was telling him that he deserved better than what he had gotten. That was true. He did deserve better. But what happened next was up to Marcus. He could let the anger control him, or he could use it as fuel to build a different kind of life. Vin said that Marcus's past was unfair and painful, but it did not have to be a prison. Marcus had talent, intelligence, and determination. He had people who believed in him now, people who saw his potential. The path forward would not be easy, but it existed if Marcus was willing to take it. Marcus asked how he was supposed to start when everything felt so unstable. How could he plan for the future when he did not even know where he would be living next month? Vin understood the question deeply. He told Marcus that stability had to come from within first. External circumstances would always have uncertainty, but Marcus could build internal stability through his work, his goals, his sense of purpose. Vin suggested they work together on a plan, not just vague dreams about the future, but concrete steps Marcus could take right now. They could identify specific educational programs, build his portfolio, connect him with more mentors in the creative industry. The foster care system would only be responsible for Marcus for a few more years. After that, he would age out. That meant he needed to be preparing now for independence. Marcus seemed overwhelmed by the idea, but also cautiously hopeful. He asked if Vin was sure about all this, if he was really committed to helping long-term. Vin gave him a direct answer. He said yes, he was committed. This was not charity or a publicity stunt. Vin saw something in Marcus that reminded him of himself, and he was not going to walk away. But Vin also made something clear. He could provide guidance, connections, and support, but Marcus had to do the work. He had to show up to classes. He had to keep developing his skills. He had to start believing that he was worth investing in. Vin could open doors, but Marcus had to walk through them. Marcus nodded, understanding the terms. He asked one more question. He wanted to know if Vin had ever felt like giving up, like the struggle was not worth it. Vin smiled sadly and said many times. There were auditions where he felt humiliated. There were years where he could barely pay rent. There were moments where success seemed impossible and he questioned why he was even trying. But Vin said he kept going because of the people who had believed in him. His stepfather, his friends, the few directors who gave him chances. He could not let them down, but more importantly, he could not let himself down. He had to prove to himself that he was capable of more than what others expected. That was what Vin wanted Marcus to understand. The road ahead would have setbacks and disappointments. There would be days where moving to another foster home or facing another rejection would make everything feel pointless. But those moments did not define the journey. What mattered was getting back up and continuing forward. As they left the restaurant that night, Marcus walked differently. His shoulders were not as hunched. His head was held a bit higher. The conversation had not solved his problems or made his pain disappear, but it had given him something he desperately needed. Permission to feel his anger and pain while also believing in the possibility of something better. Vin drove Marcus back to his current foster home. Before Marcus got out of the car, he turned to Vin and said something that caught Vin off guard. Marcus said he used to think he did not have anyone, but he was starting to realize that was not true anymore. He had Vin, he had Patricia at the center, he had the people he had met through these opportunities. Maybe that was enough to build on. Vin felt emotion rise in his throat. He told Marcus he was right. And as Marcus's confidence grew, that circle of support would expand. People were drawn to individuals who were working toward something, who had purpose and drive. Marcus was already showing those qualities. After Marcus went inside, Vin sat in his car for a few minutes before driving away. He thought about his own stepfather, about the countless conversations Irving had with him when he was struggling. He understood now in a deeper way what Irving must have felt. The desire to protect someone from pain while knowing they had to face it to grow. The hope that your words and support would make a difference. The pride in watching someone begin to believe in themselves. Vin had achieved success beyond what he had imagined as a young man. But helping Marcus felt more significant than any movie premiere or award. This was about changing the trajectory of another person's life, about breaking cycles of abandonment and instability. It was about showing up and being present, the way Irving had shown up for him. This was what mattered. 18 months had passed since Vin first met Marcus at the community center. The changes in the boy during that time were remarkable. Marcus was now 17 years old and had become almost unrecognizable from the guarded, defensive teenager who had barely acknowledged Vin in that reflection room. The transformation had not happened overnight. It had been a series of small steps, setbacks, and victories. Marcus had been moved to 2 different foster homes during that period, which had caused disruptions and stress. But with Vin's support and the consistency of the community center programs, Marcus had maintained his focus on developing his artistic skills and exploring career possibilities in the film industry. One of the most significant developments had been Marcus's enrollment in a technical arts program focused on film production. The program was competitive and required an application portfolio, interview, and recommendations. Marcus had been terrified of rejection. convinced he would not measure up to other applicants who probably came from more stable backgrounds with better resources. Vin had helped Marcus prepare his application. They spent hours organizing his best drawings into a cohesive portfolio that demonstrated his range and skill. Vin wrote a detailed recommendation letter that highlighted not just Marcus's artistic talent, but his determination, work ethic, and growth mindset. Patricia and Sarah, the production designer Marcus had met on the film set, also provided strong recommendations. The day Marcus received his acceptance letter, he called Vin immediately. Vin could hear the shock and joy in Marcus's voice. Marcus said he had read the letter 5 times because he could not believe it was real. He had been accepted into one of the best technical arts programs in the city. Vin felt pride surge through him, the same pride a parent feels when their child achieves something they worked hard for. The program was intense. Marcus took classes in production design, set construction, digital modeling, and film history. He learned industry-standard software and techniques. He worked on student film projects, building sets and creating props. For the first time in his life, Marcus was in an environment where his creativity was not just accepted, but celebrated and pushed to grow. His teachers noticed his talent quickly. His eye for detail and his ability to visualize 3-dimensional spaces from 2-dimensional sketches were exceptional. One of his instructors told him he had the potential to work professionally in production design if he continued to develop his skills. That comment became a turning point for Marcus. It was one thing for Vin or Sarah to believe in him, but hearing it from someone with no personal connection validated something Marcus had been afraid to believe about himself. During this period, Vin continued to include Marcus in film industry experiences whenever possible. He brought Marcus to several more film sets, industry events, and even a few smaller film festivals, where Marcus could network and learn. At one festival, Marcus met independent filmmakers who were working on low-budget projects and needed talented crew members. Marcus volunteered to work as a production assistant on 2 short films, gaining real hands-on experience. Those experiences taught Marcus valuable lessons about the reality of filmmaking. It was not always glamorous. It involved long hours, hard physical work, and countless unglamorous tasks. But Marcus loved it. He loved being part of a team working toward a creative vision. He loved problem-solving when budgets were tight or logistics got complicated. He loved seeing a project come together piece by piece. Vin watched Marcus blossom in these environments. The angry, defensive boy was still in there somewhere, but now Marcus had tools to channel those feelings into productive work. He had purpose and direction. He had goals that extended beyond just surviving to the next day. One of the most touching moments came during a casual conversation, when Marcus mentioned he had started seeing a counselor regularly through the community center. He said talking to someone professional had helped him process his childhood trauma and his feelings about his parents. He was learning that his mother's addiction and his father's absence were not reflections of his worth as a person. They were about their own struggles and failures, not his. Marcus told Vin the counseling was hard. Confronting painful memories and emotions was not comfortable, but he was starting to understand himself better. He was learning to recognize when old patterns of thinking were holding him back. He was developing healthier ways to cope with stress and uncertainty. Vin was proud of Marcus for doing that work. Many people avoided dealing with their past trauma, letting it control their present and future without even realizing it. Marcus was choosing a different path. He was choosing to heal. As Marcus approached his senior year in the technical arts program, practical concerns about his future became more pressing. He would age out of the foster care system when he turned 18. That meant he would need to find housing, support himself financially, and navigate adulthood without a family safety net. It was a frightening prospect, even with all the progress he had made. Vin helped Marcus research options for transitional housing programs for former foster youth. They looked into scholarships and financial aid for continuing education. They discussed realistic timelines for Marcus to build his career. Vin also used his industry connections to help Marcus find internship opportunities that could lead to paid work. Sarah, the production designer who had mentored Marcus since their first meeting, offered him a summer internship with her team on an upcoming film project. It was a significant opportunity. Marcus would be working as a junior assistant to the art department on a real studio production. He would be paid, gain valuable experience, and make professional connections. Marcus was nervous but excited. The internship turned out to be transformative. Marcus worked 12-hour days, often doing physically demanding work. He helped build sets, sourced props, and assisted with countless detailed tasks. But he also got to sit in on creative meetings, see how budgets were allocated, and learn from experienced professionals. Sarah told Vin later that Marcus was one of the best interns she had ever worked with. He asked smart questions, learned quickly, and showed initiative. More than that, he brought creative ideas to the table. During one production meeting, Marcus suggested a design solution that saved the department money while actually improving the visual result. Sarah made sure to credit Marcus publicly for the contribution. That moment was powerful for Marcus. Being recognized for his ideas in front of industry professionals gave him a level of confidence he had never possessed before. He started to see himself differently, not as a foster kid lucky to get opportunities, but as a talented creative professional who belonged in these spaces. Toward the end of the internship, Sarah pulled Marcus aside and offered him something incredible. She was preparing to start pre-production on another film that would shoot in 6 months. She wanted to hire Marcus as a paid production assistant in the art department if he was interested. The job would not be glamorous and it would be temporary, but it would be real employment in the industry with the potential to lead to more work. Marcus could barely contain his excitement when he told Vin about the offer. This was exactly the kind of break that could launch a career. Vin reminded Marcus that this opportunity came because of Marcus's talent and hard work, not just luck or connections. Marcus had earned this through his dedication, his willingness to learn, and his performance during the internship. As Marcus's 18th birthday approached, Vin organized a small celebration dinner with Marcus, Patricia, Sarah, and a few other people who had been part of Marcus's support system over the past 2 years. It was not a large party, but it was meaningful. These were people who genuinely cared about Marcus and had invested in his success. During the dinner, each person shared what they had observed in Marcus's growth. Patricia talked about how Marcus had gone from a withdrawn teenager who barely spoke to anyone to a young man who now volunteered at the community center, mentoring younger kids. Sarah talked about Marcus's professional development and his impressive work ethic. Others shared similar observations about his transformation. When it was Vin's turn to speak, he kept it simple. He said he was proud of Marcus, not just for what he had accomplished, but for the person he was becoming. Marcus had faced circumstances that would have broken many people, but he had chosen to fight for something better. He had chosen to believe in himself even when it was hard. That kind of courage and determination would take him far. Marcus listened to all of this with emotion written clearly on his face. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with feeling. He thanked everyone for believing in him when he did not believe in himself. He said he used to think he was completely alone in the world, but this group had shown him what real support looked like. He promised to make them proud and to pay forward the help he had received by supporting others someday. After the dinner ended and everyone had left, Vin and Marcus walked together for a while. Marcus talked about his plans and his fears. He was excited about the job with Sarah but nervous about living independently. He worried about money, about whether he could really make it in such a competitive industry, about all the practical challenges ahead. Vin listened, and then reminded Marcus of how far he had already come. 2 years ago, Marcus did not think he had any future at all. Now he had skills, connections, work experience, and a job offer. Yes, challenges remained, but Marcus had proven he could overcome obstacles. The key was to keep moving forward even when things got difficult. Marcus said that having Vin in his life had changed everything. Vin had given him opportunities, but more importantly, he had given him hope. He had shown Marcus that his circumstances did not define his potential. Vin told Marcus that he had not given him anything that was not already there. He had just helped Marcus see what was possible and provided some guidance along the way. As they said goodbye that night, both understood that their relationship had evolved. Marcus was no longer a lost teenager needing rescue. He was a young adult launching his career, still needing support and guidance, but increasingly capable of standing on his own. Vin was not trying to be Marcus's father or replace the family Marcus had lost. He was a mentor, a guide, someone who cared about Marcus's well-being and success. For Vin, watching Marcus grow and thrive had become one of the most rewarding experiences of his life. It reminded him that success was not just about personal achievements. It was about what you did with your platform and resources to help others. It was about being for someone else what others had been for you. 2 years had passed since Marcus accepted the production assistant position on Sarah's film. He was now 20 years old and had established himself as a reliable and talented member of several production design teams. His reputation in the industry was growing steadily. Directors and production designers who worked with him requested him for future projects. His phone rang regularly with job offers. Marcus had moved into a small apartment in a modest neighborhood, sharing the space with a roommate he had met through the film community. The apartment was nothing fancy, but it was his. He paid his own rent, bought his own groceries, and managed his own life. For someone who had spent his entire childhood being moved from place to place, having his own stable home meant everything. His career trajectory had exceeded even his own expectations. After working as a production assistant on several films, he had been promoted to assistant art director on an independent feature. The director had been impressed with Marcus's creative input and problem-solving abilities. That credit opened more doors. He was now working consistently, building an impressive resume and saving money. But Marcus had not forgotten where he came from. He volunteered regularly at the community center where he first met Vin, mentoring teenagers who reminded him of his younger self. He talked to them about career possibilities in the arts and creative industries. He showed them his portfolio and shared his story honestly, including the struggles and setbacks. He wanted them to understand that success was possible even from difficult circumstances, but it required work, persistence, and willingness to accept help when it was offered. Patricia, the community center director, told Vin that Marcus had become one of their most effective mentors. The kids responded to him because he understood their reality. He did not talk down to them or offer empty motivational speeches. He gave them practical advice, honest feedback, and genuine encouragement. Several young people Marcus had mentored were now pursuing creative careers themselves. During this time, Vin and Marcus had maintained regular contact, though less frequently than in the early years. Marcus was building his own life and no longer needed constant guidance. They met for dinner every few months, texted occasionally, and Vin made sure to attend important moments in Marcus's life. Their relationship had evolved from mentor-mentee to something more like family, though neither felt the need to label it precisely. One afternoon, Vin received a call from Marcus. There was excitement in his voice. Marcus had been offered his first job as a full art director on a mid-budget independent film. It was a significant promotion and a major career milestone. The director had specifically requested Marcus based on his previous work. Marcus would be responsible for the entire visual design of the film, managing a small team and making creative decisions that would shape the movie's look and feel. Vin congratulated Marcus enthusiastically. He knew what this meant. Art director was a legitimate professional position in the film industry. Marcus was no longer an assistant or intern figuring things out. He was being trusted with significant creative responsibility. This was the kind of credit that could launch a successful long-term career. Marcus asked if Vin would be willing to visit the set during filming. He wanted Vin to see what he had built with the opportunities Vin had helped provide. Vin agreed immediately. Weeks later, when filming began, Vin cleared his schedule to spend a day on Marcus's set. Walking onto that set felt surreal for Vin. Marcus greeted him professionally, dressed in work clothes, carrying plans and sketches, clearly in command of his department. The sets Marcus had designed were impressive, detailed, and atmospheric. The director introduced Vin to the crew and spoke highly of Marcus's work and professionalism. Vin watched Marcus direct his team, solve problems as they arose, and collaborate with the cinematographer about how lighting would interact with his sets. This was not the defensive, guarded teenager sitting alone in a community center room anymore. This was a confident young professional who had found his place in the world. Marcus belonged here. He had earned his position through talent and hard work. Watching him work filled Vin with a profound sense of pride and satisfaction. During a break in filming, Vin and Marcus found a quiet moment to talk. Marcus thanked Vin again for everything, but this time it felt different. It was not the desperate gratitude of someone who felt they owed a debt. It was the sincere appreciation of one person acknowledging another's positive impact on their life. Marcus said he had been thinking a lot about their first conversation, about what Vin had told him regarding his stepfather Irving. Marcus said he finally understood what Vin meant about family being about choice rather than blood. Vin had chosen to invest time and energy in Marcus when he had no obligation to do so. That choice had changed the entire direction of Marcus's life. Vin told Marcus the truth. He said that meeting Marcus had changed his life too. It reminded him of why success mattered beyond personal satisfaction. It reinforced the importance of using his platform to open doors for others. It connected him back to his own roots and the people who had helped him when he needed it most. Supporting Marcus had given Vin's success deeper meaning. Marcus mentioned something that surprised Vin. He said he had recently started trying to find his mother. Not to rebuild a relationship necessarily, but to get closure and understanding. His counselor had helped him work through his feelings about his parents over the years, and he felt ready to confront that part of his past directly. He had learned through social services that his mother had been in and out of rehabilitation programs and was currently living in a halfway house trying to maintain sobriety. Marcus said he was not sure what would come from reaching out to her. Maybe nothing. Maybe she would not want contact. Maybe it would be painful and disappointing, but he felt he needed to try. He needed to see her as an adult and understand his own story more completely. He wanted to tell her that despite everything, he had turned out okay. He had built a life. Vin supported Marcus's decision while cautioning him to protect himself emotionally. Reconnecting with parents who had caused childhood trauma was complicated and could bring up difficult feelings. But Vin understood the need for closure, for trying to make sense of your own history. He told Marcus that whatever happened, Marcus had already proven his worth and built his own identity separate from his parents' failures. A few months later, Marcus did meet with his mother. The meeting was emotional and complicated. His mother was working hard on her recovery, but carried tremendous guilt about losing custody of her children and the trauma she had caused. Marcus told Vin afterward that it had been difficult but necessary. He did not have a clear relationship with his mother moving forward, but he had gotten some answers and a better understanding of her own struggles with addiction and mental health. Most importantly, the meeting confirmed something Marcus had been learning through therapy and life experience. His mother's addiction and his father's absence were not about him. They were about their own inability to handle parenthood and their own unresolved issues. Marcus was not unwanted or unlovable. He had simply been a child caught in circumstances created by adults who were not capable of raising him properly. That realization freed something in Marcus. He stopped carrying the weight of feeling like he had been rejected because something was wrong with him. He understood now that he had simply had the misfortune of being born to people who were not equipped for parenthood. It was sad and unfair, but it was not his fault and it did not define his value as a person. By his 21st birthday, Marcus had achieved a level of stability and success he never imagined possible during those dark years in foster care. He had a thriving career, a stable home, healthy relationships, and most importantly, a sense of purpose and self-worth. He was building the life he wanted rather than just surviving the life circumstances had dealt him. The community center held a small celebration for Marcus. Recognizing his success and his contributions as a mentor, young people he had worked with spoke about how he had inspired them. Patricia presented him with an award for outstanding service to the youth program. Local news even covered the story, highlighting Marcus as an example of resilience and the positive impact of community programs. During his speech at the celebration, Marcus shared his story openly. He talked about growing up in foster care, about the anger and pain he carried, about meeting Vin at his lowest point. He talked about the people who had believed in him and given him opportunities. He emphasized that success had not come from luck, but from choosing to work hard, accept help, and believe that change was possible. But Marcus also made a point that resonated deeply with everyone in the room. He said that while his individual success mattered, the real issue was systemic. Thousands of foster youth aged out of the system every year with minimal support or resources. Many ended up homeless, incarcerated, or struggling with addiction. Marcus said he had been lucky to meet people who cared and helped, but luck should not determine whether a young person gets a chance at a decent life. He announced that he was starting a small nonprofit program to provide mentorship and career exploration opportunities specifically for foster youth interested in creative industries. He had been saving money and building connections for this purpose. It would start small, but he hoped to grow it over time. He wanted to be for other kids what Vin and others had been for him. Vin attended the celebration and watched Marcus speak with tears in his eyes. This was the full circle moment he had not even realized he was hoping for. Marcus had not just saved himself. He was now actively working to help others. He had taken the lessons and support he received and was paying them forward. That was the true measure of success. After the event, Vin and Marcus walked outside together. The evening air was cool, and the city lights were beginning to glow. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both reflecting on how far they had come since that first meeting in the community center reflection room. Marcus broke the silence. He told Vin that he could never fully repay what Vin had done for him. Vin shook his head and said there was no debt to repay. What mattered was what Marcus did with the opportunities he had been given. And clearly Marcus was doing something meaningful with them. Marcus said he finally understood what Vin meant years ago about family being about choice. Vin had chosen to see potential in an angry, defensive teenager, and had chosen to invest time in helping him grow. That choice had saved Marcus's life in very real ways. And now Marcus was choosing to extend that same support to others. Vin told Marcus he was proud of him, not just for his professional success, but for the person he had become. Marcus had taken tremendous pain and trauma and transformed it into purpose and compassion. He had not let his difficult past make him bitter or cruel. Instead, he had let it make him stronger and more determined to help others facing similar struggles. As they said goodbye that evening, both understood their relationship had reached a new phase. Marcus no longer needed Vin's guidance in the same way. He had become his own person, capable of making decisions and navigating challenges independently. But the connection between them remained strong, built on genuine care, mutual respect, and shared understanding. For Vin, the experience of mentoring Marcus had become one of the most significant chapters of his life. It reminded him that success was not just about box office numbers or awards. It was about the impact you had on individual lives. It was about using your advantages and resources to create opportunities for others. It was about being the person for someone else that you needed when you were struggling. For Marcus, meeting Vin had literally changed the trajectory of his entire life. Without that intervention, he likely would have aged out of foster care with minimal skills, no connections, and little hope for a meaningful career. Instead, he had built a successful life doing work he loved, surrounded by people he cared about and actively working to help others. Both men carried forward the lessons of their relationship. Vin continued supporting youth programs and looking for young people who needed guidance and opportunities. Marcus grew his nonprofit and mentored dozens of foster youth, helping them discover their talents and navigate toward better futures. Years later, when people asked Vin about the most important work he had done, he often mentioned Marcus, not because he wanted credit, but because the experience had taught him what truly mattered. Fame and fortune were fine, but using your position to change someone's life, that was the real privilege of success. And Marcus never forgot that his career, his stability, his sense of self-worth all started with a simple choice by someone who saw potential in him when he could not see it in himself. That knowledge shaped how he lived, how he treated others, and how he defined success. His past no longer haunted him. Instead, it informed his purpose and drove his mission to ensure other young people got the chances he had received. The story that began in a community center reflection room with a defensive teenager and a curious celebrity had transformed into something far more significant. It became a story about the power of mentorship, the importance of believing in young people, and the way one person's choice to care can create ripples that extend far beyond what anyone could predict. It was a story about how family is built through commitment and choice, and how success means nothing if you do not use it to lift others up alongside you.